Awesome. Well, hello everyone. My name is Anthony Johnson, and I am a senior account executive with Hilda Nielsen Strategies. With me is Heather McNorma and Sarah Kettenberg, and we are working with the Carton Councils of North America to put on the Community Education Award program. So today we will be talking about the behavior science and and how it relates to recycling education. This meeting will be recorded, and so that way you can use it for to share on social media or with other staff members, or if you just want to review it in the future and kind of watch back on what was talked about today. If you have any questions, please do use the raised hand feature or put a comment in the chat feature. We will try to get to it during the presentation. If we don't, we will be addressing all the questions at the end of the presentation. After the presentation, we will do a little recap as well as talk about what is to come after this. And with that, I will hand it off to Heather.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Anthony. If you can go to the first slide, please. So here's the deal. There's a ton. This is basically usually an hour to even a 90-minute presentation on these findings. So I'm going to go super fast. We will be sending out the full deck, but the deck will also have some slides that are hidden that I'm not going through today. I feel like they don't translate well for a presentation, but they're more like really detailed and have a ton of stuff in it. So you'll be getting more if there's more things you're interested in. And I just want to reiterate, this is a pretty small group. So if you have questions during that are, I'll try to look at the chat and kind of stop. I'd like this to be a little more conversational if it makes sense that way. So anyway, I'm going to just jump in. So I feel like behavior science is something, there's been a lot of organizations and a lot of talk in the last 10 plus years about it in pertaining to recycling. The Recycling Partnership started an organization or subcommittee and has been doing a lot on it in the last year or so. The Carton Council we commissioned a study right after COVID. And we wanted to better understand how behavior science, what's the way people make decisions and how we can use behavior science to improve our education. And while we looked at or use this really thinking about food and beverage cartons specifically, the findings looked at recycling in general. And so it's really more mainstream recycling. The focus is primarily on recycling at home, but it also touched on some recycling on the go as well. So if you want to go ahead to the next slide, what we learned is that for good or for bad, when people decide, hey, yeah, cool, I really should recycle, either start recycling or recycling more, which we think is awesome, and it is awesome. Unfortunately, that's sort of the first step to them really becoming a habitual recycler. And so the challenge for us as educators is that there's all these little things along the path that have to kind of happen before it's ingrained in them and they don't even really think about it. So I'm not going to go through these right now on this, but the very next slide, we're going to go through, it's sort of a deeper dive at a lot of those things. And if you want to go to head to the next one, what we learned is there's 7 sort of considerations for improving recycling behavior. So there's sort of like these 7 things kind of are really instrumental for helping get people across that path. So this is the part, each of these 7, you could probably spend 5 to 10 minutes on some of them. So for each of the slides, this is where, if you want to go ahead to the next one, I'm going to present and talk to one slide, but when you get a deck, there will be a second that has a lot more data points on each of these. Availability. So all of these 7 considerations really should not be treated equally. If I had a pie chart, availability would probably be about 75%. And what that means is that if it's kind of not easy or convenient for someone to recycle and take on the new behavior, that's the biggest thing. And this isn't obviously a big shock to everyone on this call. But making it easy as possible is first and foremost for increasing that behavior. I think the thing with this though is that it's not necessarily just a bin or just this is encompassing a whole bunch of things. So it's sort of like what makes it easy for that resident. So it's as simple things as the proximity to the bin, to the location of consumption, things like that. It's the storage space, all of those things. But it is really important because this is more, in a lot of ways, an infrastructure thought. And all the best education in the world, if it's very hard to recycle, it's your path. The rest, moving them is even further. Go ahead to the next slide, please. So the second one is social influence and identity. This one's kind of interesting. I feel like there's been a lot that's been covered and discussed on this, but it really is fascinating is that it's that people are influenced a lot by their society's expectations. And I say their society because this is where it comes down to their community, and it could even be their streets. So we're really motivated to do what others do. And there's such an power of like keeping up with the Joneses, which is why a lot of times you see like one street, a lot of people put out, and then other streets people don't put out. There is so much of that going on here. So the good part is that it can be powerful if you have other people doing recycling. The bad part is that it can actually have a detrimental effect if no one is. So it's really, I think that part of this is thinking about what you can do in your strong communities to make sure that they stay strong. But then on the other side, are there ways to challenge, find a few people who are maybe community leaders or influencers and really motivate them. And it also comes down to the idea of like friendly competition is real and can have an effect. Next slide, please. So prompts and cues. So this one is all about the reminders. And as much as we think we might remind people or educate or, oh, I put out a calendar, it's up on the website. It was really kind of, people need to be reminded and reminded regularly. And so I feel like there's kind of two levels of this. One is you guys pushing out education as much as you can, but the other is creating prompts and cues within a household. So I know there's like some apps and that are coming up that some folks are using that remind people about when their day is, things like that. But it's also, bin stickers, just different, anything you can do to try to get in front of people to remind them. But then the other part is giving people the tools to set up their own reminders. So if you do have residents who maybe have signed a pledge, it's like, okay, so let's think about your house. What can I do to help you create your own prompts and cues? We have a question here. Let's see. Please, can you give some specific examples that you have seen of beneficial implementation of societal influence key takeaways? So sure. So I think that this comes down to, there's a whole bunch, and depending on the size of your community, but so I'm going to give you an example that is not related to recycling, but that I think everyone has seen. And that is, or at least we do it in my state, and it is electricity bills, or gas bills, utility bills. And ours in the last couple of years have come and it will say, here's what your bill is and here's your energy consumption, but it compares it to your neighbors. And it's like you're on this, you're high, you're low. And I have to say, you're just like, oh my God, I don't want to consume more energy than my neighbors. And then it is followed by tips of what you can do to reduce your energy consumption. And I have worked on this with obviously energy clients, and that sense of being lower than the norm in your community can be really powerful. So I know that's not related directly to recycling, but it's one that is proven. So I think that same sense of giving, I don't know what kind of data people have, but as much as you can, if you can kind of tell people, there's that fine line, because you don't want to shame people, but if you can kind of tell, this is a very high performing community. Your community isn't performing as well, but we know you can, making it maybe more of a positive. Okay, let's go to number 4, please. So product experience. This, I think found this very, very interesting. So how people feel about a product in terms of recycling or its recyclability is they've put more value on products, according to our research, that are like firmer and solid. So literally, if you had a shiny can, okay, I'm recycling it for sure. But you take that same can, maybe you dent it, maybe it's dirty. Even though we know that is still completely as recyclable, they view it more as litter. So things that were damaged or deformed, and I'm definitely not talking about like an oily pizza box, but more just something that is, recyclables they look like trash. They tend to not be clean and shiny. But that affected people's mentality in terms of them viewing it to be less recyclable. I think this is tough because, we don't want to turn our marketing materials into making or, having these like ugly, gross images of the recyclables. But I think maybe it's just making sure to reiterate to people that, you don't have to have this shiny, clean, recyclable product going on. Next slide, please. Okay, planning and commitments. This is a little bit like prompts and cues, but there is a distinction. And so what we found is that people, the tighter or the more honed in on their plan and their commitment, the better. And I think this sort of makes sense for all kinds of things. So like, I'm going to lose weight or I'm going to quit smoking. That's very lofty. How am I going to do it? So for recycling, it's fine to say, I'm going to start recycling or I'm going to recycle better, but it's even trying to make people hone in on that more. So like we have one is, I'm going to recycle in all parts of my house, not just the kitchen. I'm going to be more cognizant of what I'm consuming upstairs or in the bathroom or things like that. We put here, instead of just, I'm going to recycle my cartons, but let's be honest, I will recycle my cartons. It kind of is already honed in from just a broad recycle. But maybe it's the holidays are coming up. I'm going to consume more things. I'm going to be very conscious to recycle everything I can. The other part to this, and I feel like this is not new, you probably have heard this already, making it official, like telling people, some fun things. I know Keep America Beautiful has done this for a couple of years around America Recycles Day, allowing people to post what their commitments are. And it just makes them, it makes you feel a little more on the hook. So I think the big things here are also personalizing it, which is the opportunity to make more of a plan that's relevant to you and, ways that you can provide for people to share that. All right, let's go to the next one. Reciprocity. So this one is interesting and I think is the hardest to sort of get your arms around. The concept with people is that we don't like to feel indebted, first of all. And so we want to feel like we're at least doing what's expected of us. And we don't want to feel like we're sort of the slackers, if you will. And so when other people invest in us, it motivates us to invest back. But the flip side to this is that we do perceive, as consumers perceive, that their contribution is very small and doesn't matter when it compared to the huge environmental problems. So it's like companies, businesses, government, their role is so much bigger. So I'm a resident. Does it really matter if I do it? And so I feel like the big takeaway here is that, at the end of the day, we're putting all, businesses, companies, government, we're putting all of this investment into recycling, but it really only works if residents do it. I mean, that's, and that's how we get the feedstock. So they have an important role, and it's kind of reinforcing that important role in it. And I feel like there's another example that I liked. It's not related to recycling, but it falls under this category. I think you see increasingly companies. I'm trying to remember who I just saw one. I feel like it was actually Pottery Barn, and they had, but don't quote me on that if I'm wrong. But this concept of, if you buy this, we will give back, and we're going to plant 5 trees for you just purchase this wooden piece of furniture. Or it's, this concept that you did this and now we're doing this to help. And you see a lot of campaigns, corporate campaigns around that, and it's because they're trying to play into that a little bit. Okay, let's go to the 7th one. So knowledge, this is the most common, and I feel like this is what a lot of our education does, this and number 1. And it's basically, making sure people are educated, that they know what to recycle, but that they also know why it's important to recycle. And I was glad that this was a finding, because it basically said it's still important to do that. But with knowledge, putting knowledge out there, you kind of have to take it to the next level. People have become very sophisticated. And so I think recycling is good. It's good for the environment. It saves natural resources. That's great. But it's like, as much as you can take it to the next level and be more detailed, the better. And consumers, for the most part, don't really argue. The vast majority do already know or believe that theoretically recycling is the good and the right thing to do. So it's just, as much as you can give them a little more concrete information. And I feel like this is that what I just said sounds easy, but that's the challenge, right? So maybe it is localizing it a little bit. Maybe if there's some local facts that you can talk about, maybe there's some cost savings. If you live in a community where you have an end market close by, or any kind of end markets, you can talk about that. But it's just and if not, I think it's still like, if you look at some of the trade associations, including Carton Council, we do have some specific facts pertaining to each of our commodities. I think the Recycling Partnership does too. So it's just taking it a little bit further in providing that knowledge. So I whizzed through that, but I was afraid that I would spend way too much time, and there is a ton. As I mentioned, so for each of these, we have slides that really kind of break apart the data. But are there any other, we do have another question. Sort of off topic, that is okay. I saw that straws should be pushed back into the carton and then recycled. Can you share what happens with the straws? This is something that our supporters will ask about if we propose that practice. Okay, that is an excellent question. So so the first answer to that is, you should always talk to your MRF first, because obviously if you're doing any education, you want to make sure your MRF is in line with that. Now I'm going to answer that, and I'm going to tell you where I'm getting this answer from. So the Carton Council did a MRF evaluation or MRF study a few years ago, and it involved a bunch of different MRFs and following cartons through to watch, how they went through. And so this was one of the findings that came out. Since then, we've talked to many MRFs about it. So if you think about all the different kinds of cartons, there's only a few that have straws. What we don't want to happen is, if that straw is just, they're usually very small, smaller than even standard straws. They're very easily blown away. They can become all kind of litter, right? And that's what everyone wants to prevent. I feel like if it's loose and it ends up in the recycling bin, they're so small, it's just, who knows what's going to happen to it. When it's pushed into the carton, that means that carton's going to go through the MRF, and it's going to get sorted, and it will end up in the bale with the carton in it. The assumption is there's not a ton of those straws. They are, it is a plastic. So the way it ends up, depending if it goes to a full carton recycler, where they make sustainable, that's great. Who cares if we even had every carton had a straw in it? If it goes in the other direction, it may or may not, because some of that residue does get recycled and some of it doesn't when it goes through the hydropulper. But it's still, our understanding is that it is not problematic. We are increasingly working on ways to capture and utilize that remaining plastic, and sometimes it does. There are other uses, and I am definitely not the best person to speak to those, but the anyway, that was a very long answer, but my first point is definitely check with your MRF first. But that what we have been telling people is that it's, you know, pushing it in is generally not problematic. Any questions or comments, or honestly, as anyone else have, you know, even want to talk about the straws? All right, awesome. So I just wanted to kind of touch base. We're, you know, it's August 1st. We have tons of time. I know some people have already updated their website, which is awesome. Everything's not due till December 1st. I think we're going to be having at least one other webinar and maybe two, but to talk about you know, the other marketing activities that are required, because there's a lot of opportunity for, you know, a million different kinds of marketing, and want to make sure if people have questions about what they can or can't do, and maybe also just share. And just to reiterate, the website update has to include is all specific to cartons, but the marketing activities are broad. They just cartons need to be included in what happens. And that is an activity that would basically happen anytime this calendar year, but by December 1st. And then the other part is we have sort of a contest within this. And so everybody, as long as you've done that, will receive the 2K. But there's an opportunity to win an additional $3,000 if people going above and beyond and do really impressive things and all that. So any questions about anything, the behavior science, the grants, anything at all? All right. Are there any topics? So we have kept these webinars really short because we know everyone's really busy. I hope they're helpful. But are there any topics that people would like to hear more about? You know, anything at all? Anything that would help you in this grant? This is it's technically our third year of doing this, but last year was very, very small. We just had a few participate. The year prior, we had a whole bunch. This is the first year that we have the contest within it. So I will say one of the feedbacks that we've gotten is that people really like the opportunity to kind of hear from each other and share. With other grants, you just are working in this little silo. So part of having these is that we want to create opportunities so you can see each other and hear what, you know, what questions or struggles or whatever. So, yeah,
Heather, I'm looking on the Carton Council website. So like this topic of straws, is that something that's covered on the website
So that's a good question. So we are in the process of updating our website right now. And I believe it's under an FAQ, but it's not front and prominent at all.
Okay.
I think our big message, if it is there, it's probably somewhere under communities. I think the big message that we try to make is that really for anybody, for any commodity, you should talk to your MRF first about and really be in alignment with that. So I can check where it is on this website, but I think we're looking to launch an updated website or by America Recycles Day. And part of that is the new website. It gets a little confusing right now because there's the consumer side and the industry side, and it's like it's kind of ridiculous. So it's going to be one giant website, but hopefully navigated so you can more easily find exactly what you're looking for.
So the reason I asked that, I mean, this is a nice fit for what I'm looking at doing is we're going to put together, some slides, whatever you want to call it, a deck for kind of a topical social media campaign. So run it for, a month. I don't know exactly what we're looking at, maybe November, and fitting it into the America Recycles theme. But having, kind of this, that topic. Hey, did you know your straw is better off being pushed back in than having a chance to become ocean litter, or whatever. And that kind of topic. Or, hey, did you know that your carton is going to be made back into, new paper that could end up in a coffee cup, something like that, being pretty specific to like Sustana and what they're doing with the cartons when they get them back in, but not being specific, to all the detail.
I see that Sarah just put a link to what I'm assuming is where content is now. And we do usually say with the straws at the same time the cap's on. And the other thing that we say is we usually tell people empty the contents, but you don't have to rinse, because again, I feel like that gets into, you have people that are putting it in the dishwasher, or, it's sort of defeating the purpose of the whole saving. So
yeah, I mean, we've always used that clean and empty without getting too hung up on what clean is.
cool.
Let people make that decision for their own. Although I've usually used the phrase spatula clean, not necessarily for cartons, but for jars and cans, when people get, do I have to rinse out all the soup, or do I have to get all the mayonnaise out? And I've always been like, think about this, spatula clean. Don't go wasting water.
That's a good one.
Especially in plastic, since it all gets washed anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly. Two other things I just wanted to give you guys a heads up for. The Carton Council is going to be launching a podcast series. Our first one will come out this month. It might be next week or the week after. And some are video as well as audio. The first one will be audio and video, and it will actually be from Emmett County, Michigan. And that includes the podcast is its own part, and it's all about, there's some great stuff. It's about education. It's about, there's a little just adding a new material, but then they also, which I think we have out now, there's a video tour that is not, it's not super polished, but it's of Lindsay Walker from Emmett County giving the tour. And it's all inclusive. And so it's just, I know, not everyone can afford to have like a big photo shoot or video shoot of your local MRF. So it's kind of nice and they do have robots too. So it just shows the whole process from the beginning to the end. So you will all be on the list when the podcast goes live, but just wanted to give you a heads up about that. And we're also, always looking for, always be looking for new content or new topic ideas. It's not going to be one where it's like every, at a set date, we're issuing a new podcast. We're on the hook, I think, for 4 this year. And then I think it's like maybe 4 a year, but we'll see. I feel like there's a lot of podcasts that are going out there. And so we didn't want to just put something out there to put it out there. But rather, I think the sort of cornerstone of the Carton Council is that everything is about collaboration. And so for the most part, what we're looking to do is showcase someone else in the recycling process and, highlight their activities, their success, that kind of thing. So
this video from Emmett, is that what you're referring to?
So what Sarah just linked is the tour, which is out there already on YouTube. Okay, and the podcast, you'll get an email about that when it goes out. So I'm noticing, so we're at the half hour. I definitely talked more, but if any other questions or any thoughts, you can still put it in the chat or always reach out to us. All right, cool. All right, and we will be sending out the recording, but also the slides that have, as I said, it's more of a report. There's so much, the behavior science, it is really, it's very fascinating. And I feel like a lot of it, when you're looking at it, you're like, it makes sense, but it's just, you know, it's a tough putt. And if it was easy, we would all, you know, the recycling rates would be significantly higher already. So anyway, all right. Thanks so much, everybody.
Have a good day.
Bye. Take care.